Welcome to Our Soul Whisper with Cathi Belmont and co-host Dr. Pat, a sacred space for self-discovery, healing, and transformation. At the heart of Our Soul Whisper is the sacred truth. When we pause and listen inward, the soul always speaks. This show offers a safe, empowering space where those whispers are heard, honored, and lovingly guided into full expression. Each episode invites you to be curious about yourself and the reality you're in, while gently reminding you that you are exactly where you need to be. Let today's message settle in your heart. Maybe even journal about it. And if something resonates, peace, clarity, or insight, pass it along to someone whose soul might be calling for the same. Keep listening inward. Your soul knows the way. Our Soul Whisper starts now. Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Dr. Pat and I get to take this beautiful journey. And I was just talking with both Emily and Cathi before the show. And I commented on this episode and I want to tell you all what it is. Here it is. My life is good. So why does something feel missing? Why is that? Cathi is the host of Our Soul Whisper Holistic Coaching and Integration. She is also the owner and a premier coach in this arena. So today, when Cathi Belmont takes a conversation like this on, I listen. This episode, we're going to look at what the dissatisfaction is. And there's no judgment. I want to say this, Cathi, up front to everybody today. We don't have judgment. And here's what I mean. My woes may not be yours. Cathi woes may not be mine. But if it's a woe, it's a woe. And I'm not talking about the horse you're riding. Or maybe we are, Cathi, right?
That's right. Well, we're in that year.
But this is a great topic.
Yeah.
You know, and I go through my gratitude and then I turn around and I get a certified letter that scares me to the death. So where am I going to put my energy?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hello, everyone. And I'm really excited to get into this conversation. And before I answer that, I was looking at, this push-pull between gratitude and then wanting more. And, as we get into this episode, I think we'll find it feels like a push-pull. However, it can be an and, feeling that gratitude, feeling, the blessings in your life and honoring that part of us that's, what's missing or what's wanting, what are we wanting more in our life? And so it's really looking at that and where do we want to put our energy? And I think a lot of what we can look at is getting clear about what is that part of us that feels something is missing or that just feels that, there's something in me that wants to be expressed that I just don't know how. Don't know what that is or how to really bring it to fruition. So it's really, looking at those two pieces and how we can bring them together.
Yeah, we do have to bring them together or we do have to come to some place, don't we? And I want to just talk about this for a minute because you are a premier coach. So therefore, you get to be in front of a number of different people that teeter-totter on this. My mom used to refer to situations like this as thin ice. You ever have that expression where you feel like you're walking on thin ice? Some people say eggshells. But this dance that happens between, man, I have a great life, but ... That's a dance. And it isn't ballet for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it won't. Yeah. It doesn't feel that graceful, does it?
No, it doesn't.
We can go between this reluctance to change and then feeling content and really want to look at, contentment. And it can be in a certain area of our life, we can look at different pieces and just say, I really feel content. And it comes from a place of peace. And then when we look at maybe complacency or this reluctance to change, there's a little bit of angst in there. There's a little, coming from maybe an agitation or an uncomfortableness. And a lot of this can come from, past beliefs, maybe how we grew up, just be happy with what you have. Just be happy with where things are, And a lot of times we can feel like wanting more is just selfish. We have everything that we want. And, it's always easy. And I know in my case, a lot of times it's easy to stay in that comfortable place. I know it, it's familiar. And yet there's a bigger part of me that keeps on that, keeps nudging me saying, Kath, there's something more that wants to be expressed. And then, along with, this reluctance, we look and, we look at things and we don't want to make it this big dramatic thing. Like, why would I want to change now? Or maybe looking at relationships, well, no relationship is perfect. So really wanting to keep a status quo and being, what would it be like if I stepped into this missing? And
Yeah.
so really looking at what's behind that change and, what is it coming from? A lot of
Yeah.
us are coming from that I need to change because, as opposed to there's really something in me that there's a creative part of me that I really want to express. There's a
Yeah.
real feeling there. You can feel, I need to do this. And, there's something in me that just wants to come out. If, the listeners can feel the difference, there's a softness in the second one. There's not the angst of I need to, which can be, ego driven and coming from this place of I got to get there. I got to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
And
being curious about that.
yeah, and let's talk about this for a minute because there is confusion, and I would love to hear your thought on it, especially about the difference between complacency and contentment. I think that that conversation is a big one, and having to understand it and pinpoint it. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was talking to a friend of mine actually today, and we were having a chit chat. She asked me for advice, and I said, "Don't avoid that situation." I mean, there's only so, and I wasn't kidding about the certified letter. What I said to her was, go get the mail person, get the letter, because the letter is not going to go away. These are things you have to face. So sometimes we get into this very static mode, which then
Mhm.
turns into avoidance, which then turns into avoidance of growth all along. Talk to that if you would, because is that a
Sure.
key factor in this dance we're doing?
Most definitely. And Dr. Pat, when you were talking about the first thing that came to my mind are, relationships. There's something, we're in a relationship, any type, where there's something that needs to be said, and we know it does, or communicated or shared, and we don't do it. And it can become a preventative for growth on a lot of levels and a lot of places, as far as with ourselves, obviously, and also maybe the other person or people involved. When we take that step to speak to something, it allows the other person to open up and say that as well. But I know there have been in times in my life with family members specifically where I didn't say something and it just became this big thing. And I was like, man, if I had just had the courage to say it before, I could have minimized,
Yeah.
the drama of it all. So it's looking at, it may seem comfortable. It may seem like, yeah, I think I can slide through on this one. However, life has a way of keeping us keeping us true. And
Yeah.
we can listen or not. Um, I think in my life I've learned to listen because I know going the other way doesn't help me in the long run.
Yeah.
So it's really, are we willing to listen to that? And short term, it can seem like seem okay, but in the end, we got to come back to ourselves. When we come back home at the end of the day, we know probably would have been a good idea to say something or open up that
Yeah.
conversation.
I love this. And then, Kathy, the other part of this too is the guilt and shame we have around wanting more. And yet, wanting more could be a solution. It's kind of
Mhm.
like my
Yeah.
conversation with my friend. It was like, Yeah, that could be the worst letter you have ever gotten in your life. And what can we do to take care of it? And part of it really is if you're, and she happens to be an entrepreneur. In her case, I'm like, what can we create? If you're going way out there on a limb about what you think something is that you haven't even gotten yet, but even in your worst case scenario,
Mhm.
can you take in that you are a highly creative entrepreneurial person that has gone through many other challenges in life, and this is simply your next growth spurt?
Mhm. For sure. And Dr. Pat, what you're speaking to is, how do I want to look at this situation? What perspective do I want to take on? And you led into a really great, coaching moment of, reminding yourself, where have I been successful in the past? Okay, we have this unknown in front of us, and we can take it in a lot of different ways. And we spoke of, where do we want to put our energy? Well, do we want to put our energy into, you know what? This is going to be an opportunity for me to learn from. It's going to be a gift in disguise. That's where I want to put my
Yeah,
energy,
yeah.
and really remembering, yes, how far we've come, how far
Hmm.
in that entrepreneur, person and being, how they got there, and
Hmm.
remembering the strength and the courage that it took to get there. And yeah, I can, I can, I can take this one on as well.
Yeah. And I want to ask you a question about this. How do you feel about dissatisfaction? Let's talk about that because most of the time when we're working with people, you and I, there's some pain point
Yeah.
that they've experienced. And that's why they're having a
Mhm.
conversation with you, Cathi.
Yeah.
And, one of those things is some level of dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
And I know you've heard this, I know you've experienced it in your life. So have I. And those moments of dissatisfaction, depending upon how we handle them, they could be enormous clues for a
Mhm.
next big move, right?
Exactly. It could be a moment of, once we get clear about what that dissatisfaction is, a lot of the times it's just want to grow. I think we don't have to limit our growth spurts to when we were 4 or 5 or 10 or 11. It's a moment of, there's something in us, that soul part of us that wants to be expressed.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times we think more is, more money, more status, more this or that. And going back, it can be an and conversation. A lot of what this uncovering is, well, what's underneath that want for money, status, or success? Maybe it's a feeling of freedom. Maybe it's that feeling of safety. And even with that, we can go underneath even more. What's underneath that feeling of safety for you? What is underneath that? And you can keep going and digging down to, what is it really that you want?
Yeah.
And I've learned, getting in touch with that feeling and really expressing that and allowing yourself to really tune in and feel into that, the money, status, success, that just becomes a byproduct of it. But if you get to that source and go as deep as one can go, that's where the gold is. That's where
Yeah.
that awareness is. And really saying, what is it really that I'm longing for, and what is that more that I'm wanting? And it
Yeah.
gives you that awareness. It gives you something to work with and say, okay, well, this is that perspective that I want to take, you know. So,
Let's talk about this. I want to ask you a question. Does any of this or all of it build capacity? And what I mean by that is the capacity for us to hold on to the vision of expansion and growth, whether it's personal, whether it's business, whether it's family, whether it's relationship, it doesn't matter. But how do you help your clients in this case build capacity? Because I know one thing for sure, our minds are the great disruptors. They're the great saboteurs.
yeah.
They create a battle in the mind that without help, and I'm like, I get outside help for me, I always have. But without that, that becomes a sabotage moment that I don't think anybody really wants to experience. Do you?
No, no. And a lot of it is in the coaching process is allowing you to get those thoughts out of your mind to share. A lot of the coaching is 80% of the client, you speaking, and I as the coach doing that presence and listening and asking those questions. And so it's really a moment to hear yourself and what you're saying. There could be a situation where we take something on, it's something that we're really wanting to do, and we overcommit. And then we get overwhelmed and say, see, I knew that was too much. I knew this wasn't going to work. Or
Mm-hmm.
we stay in this learning mode, which is beautiful and awesome. And there's also that point energetically where we can feel, okay, now there's a time to take a step. So,
Mm-hmm.
we kind of stay in the same mode. And so it's recognizing, what we're
Yeah.
doing. Okay, yeah, you're wanting more. And, you know, what do you think about, are you taking on too much? Or what is it that you really want to do here as
Yeah.
opposed to what you think you need to do? And
Yeah.
so coaching really supports that. Who would you be? Or what do you think would happen if you said no? Or who are you trying to be when you're taking all this on? And, or
Yeah.
who do you want to be when you say yes? Lots of different perspectives there. And that's for you to explore.
Yeah.
That's really for
Well,
you to
that's a
explore.
coaching moment because, part of this, let's talk about this. And also, I want to make sure people know one, this is an area of expertise for you. This is the work you do with other people. But more importantly, this is not a journey road that one really has to take by themselves. I know for me, for a lot of years, I thought I did. That did not work out well for me.
Yeah.
And it leads to so many things when you're huddling in the moments of dissatisfaction that turn into weeks, then years, then decades, right? And to the point where you can't even remember. So, in your practice, can you talk a little bit about one, first of all, what people need to know to work with you in coaching, but how do we, and you in particular, what is the way to integrate spirituality? Because I know for me that my lowest points in life have been the moments where I'm least connected.
Yeah.
I know it. So, how do we, first of all, there are points in time where people say, I need help. How can you give them some information so they can get help from you?
Yeah, you can go to my website, Arso Whisper, and it's all right there. And I offer, complimentary consultation calls, discovery calls about what it is, what your intention is, what you're looking for, and to really have an opportunity to take some one-on-one time and really explore what it is that you're looking for and how I can assist. And so integrating that spirituality and success in my practice, I've found it easier to bring that spirituality in because that's all part of it. And so for me, I'm so grateful and that that's there. And when
Mhm.
I was in the corporate world, there wasn't that much of a connection. And so for those that want to bring that spirituality into their space,
Mhm.
there's ways of really bridging that into what you do. It's one really, and then just kind of taking a step back, really as we grow into ourselves, we can not only honor that, but allow it to serve others and
Mhm.
allow it to give to others. We can speak up and say what's really there for us, and that gives people permission to do the same. They can
Yeah.
say, wow, she said that, maybe I can do that too. Or
Yeah.
starting that venture, or taking the step out of the box and saying, wow, look at what they did. I wonder, maybe
Yeah.
I can take that tiny step too. So it really, you're not only empowering yourself, you're empowering others when you come from that true place, that authentic place within you that really wants to be expressed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
bringing that into, professional spaces, where, maybe when you make a decision, bring some reflection into that. Or, when you're, allow, the integrity and allow the impact of things work alongside the profit of a business. So it can really be in alignment. Or when you're signing a contract or looking something over and it says, hey, it looks great, but inside you're like,
Mm.
something doesn't seem right. Maybe that's a moment to say, I'm going to stop, pause.
Hmm.
What's the next step here? Maybe there's an additional question I need to ask. But those are those subtle moments that spiritual coaching can really get you in tune with, and how it can really bridge,
Hmm.
into your, in this example, your career or your profession. So to
Yeah.
really bring those closer together, they don't have to be. You don't have to live a separate spiritual life from your work.
Yeah. And I think part of this too is, when we talk about a spiritual life, what we're talking about is just a broad realm, a vast realm of various spiritual practices that one can do. And, when I give a keynote, especially if it's a spiritual one, I call myself a spiritual hitchhiker.
Mhm.
And the look on people's faces is a little bit, and then I have to walk it back and say, but what the key thing here is, I use the word spiritual because I can't imagine living my life without knowing that I have to go to spirit before to go to anything else. And I think that's part of the conversation. So,
Yeah.
let's talk about, what if wanting more is that invitation?
Coming from that spiritual place, it's an invitation to look inside and see what more of me is wanting to emerge and grow here.
Mm.
And, one of the things I wanted to clarify too about spiritual life coaching, because I get a lot of questions about what's life coaching and, what is spiritual life coaching. And when we say spiritual, it's not a religion. It's, you can bring in elements of whatever that is for you, whatever your beliefs, your strength that you find in that. It's really about asking yourself, what part of me is wants this becoming? It's going to that inner voice, that inner intuition, and bringing that element into the coaching.
Mm.
Life coaching may not bring that in, but those wanting to bring that peace in with them, that kind of that deeper inner grounding piece into the conversation. That's what we're talking about. So I really just like to clarify that for people to really understand what it means. And it's client led, client driven,
Yeah.
whatever that piece is for you. That's what we work with. That's what we bring into the
Yeah.
conversation. That's what
And
we bring into the partnership.
Cathi, before there was, quote, religions, there was only spirituality.
Mm,
And it didn't matter what your spiritual preference was. You look back in time, you saw what the Egyptians worshiped, you saw what the Greeks worshiped. You go back to Jerusalem, and some people who call, Jesus the greatest man that ever walked the earth, walked in a spiritual circle and energy. That was his message of love. That was it. That was that
mm,
connection. And
mhm,
so,
mhm.
in the world we live in, can we tap into that antidote, that thing that literally erases all forms of fear, all forms of dissatisfaction? And that's my question for you, because when I hear you talk about it, you add that element to it that really transcends our day to day life. And that's so important, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. And as we've in our past conversations, it's really the willingness to bring that into your life on a daily basis, and it's working that muscle. We can make that decision about how to bring that in. And that's where the action part is. I think a lot of times we think action has to be these big, bold steps. And, going back to when you're talking about Jesus, it's very simple. It was love.
It was.
You
It
know,
was that simple.
we can bring it back to that simplicity in our own lives. We don't have to make it complicated or dramatic.
No.
What is that moment of peace or groundedness that I can bring myself to right now?
And it was the demonstrations of it. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Yes,
It wasn't
yes.
just talking love, because
Yeah.
yes, there was a lot of talk. It was the demonstration of it. It's like going out of your way into a Sumerian region, and first of all, having a conversation with a woman that's sitting there who doesn't have the best track record of good behavior and saying, hello, I'm the Messiah. I mean, you see,
Yeah.
that transcends
Yeah.
judgment. It transcended culture. It transcended everything.
Yeah.
And that's so important in coaching. It really is. You know
the,
this.
it's the beingness.
It's the being.
The being. It's turning it around from being to being, doing, expressing. But it's that beingness, and that's the core that you really, I assist clients in getting to, because that opens up so much awareness, and it gives them that clarity to take that next step.
Basically, what you're enacting is what Einstein said. And I'm paraphrasing it because he didn't exactly say it this way. But he basically said, hello, people. You cannot solve the problem at the level it was created. And, I mean, many of us now know what he meant.
Yeah.
The man that when he got baffled went and go to play violin. But this is what we're saying. Those tools that some of the people we revere now, these are the tools they used in life. That's why we talk about them, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So, Cathi, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, oursoulwhisper.com. And again, I'm just so happy to connect with you, to work with you, and just walk along with you as you open up and just want to take that next step, making that decision for yourself. That's really the power, making that decision for yourself, saying, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah. And I want to just tell everybody, if you're like in the space, the way we introduced the show, my life is good, so why does something feel missing? If you even resonate with that energy, get a hold of Cathi, because that is not the dedicated place we were supposed to be living in. Thank you, Cathi, for everything.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all for tuning us in, turning us on. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Our Soul Whisper with Cathi and Dr. Pat. Tune in every first and third Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific on transformationtalkradio.com and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Take a moment now to breathe in and reflect on today's message. If it brought you peace, clarity, or insight, let it settle in your heart and maybe even journal about it. Remember to like and share this episode with someone who's ready to listen within. May our soulful echoes ripple outward, awakening awareness and deep remembrance. If this show touched something within you, share it. Let's create a world where most of us pause, listen inward, and allow our light to shine. Visit OurSoulWhisper.com for more.